Howdy y'all, we got the Bulldog on the channel. We got a 2009 Toyota Highlander in here today. Customer came in here a couple weeks ago with a oil change request and look it over because we got a clink clank clunk, jiggy jiggy wobble wobble going on with the front end. Well, checking it out, we narrowed it down to at least the struts. We didn't find any bushings or anything like that loose. He was thinking tie rod ends or something like that, but no, it was the struts. I'm gonna go through this one and we'll throw the struts in there. We're doing quick struts because we found that if it needs anything more than struts, then you're at the price of a quick strut plus the labor to do it. So we just go ahead and do quick struts now. That way everything gets done. We found that about half the time or more, you need at least the mount. And with the kind of steel that they got nowadays, we're seeing a lot of busted springs. Not on a Toyota yet, but on a lot of other applications. So we just put the quick strut in and get the whole thing. Here's the driver's side. And here's the passenger side. That is just me grabbing the spring and shaking it back and forth. Now, when you're checking these things, a lot of times you're gonna have to push the boot up and get your hand on the actual shaft itself to make sure that's what's going on. But on this one, it was really bad. So I was able to just grab the spring and shake it side to side. You do this at ride height with weight on the vehicle because that's where it runs all the time. That's where everything wears out. You pick it up in the air, 9 times out of 10, that thing's gonna be tight. This one's not even leaking any that I could see. I didn't see any oil around the shocks themselves. So that's not always an indicator. I mean, if you see oil coming out of the strut, then that's bad. But this time it looked fairly dry. And in this time of year, everything is gonna look wet because as you'll see, this guy lives off a paved road just like I do. So yeah, it's gonna be kind of fun working on this. This customer also has trees wherever he parks this thing. I've already grabbed out a bucket full of leaves across this thing. This has to come out in order to get to the tops of the struts. So we're gonna have to pull the wipers and this cowl to get to it. But since it was completely covered in leaves, well, you just grab your shop vac and get rid of all that stuff. We've got the, wow, we've got the top of the strut exposed, and you can see obviously that we've got a mount ripped out. Look at that right there. Let's see if I can moving around. That one there is in the center yet. But most struts, even on the back, you want to replace them as a pair, at least. We advised all the way around on this vehicle, but it's pushing 300,000 miles. The engine still runs good, the transmission still shifts good, but it's getting long in the tooth, so customer opted just to do what they absolutely needed to do. I don't blame them, but the bare minimum is you replace both sides, because if you put one new one on and one old one on and leave it there, you're going to get ducks and dives. Whenever it bounces, it's going to dive one way or the other because you got one worn out and one brand new. Always replace as a pair. Now that we've got the top exposed, so I don't have to do a lot of work when I'm standing up on something extra, I'm going to set the pads and we're going to pick this thing up in the air. Remember what I said about always check at ride height? There's no movement in that at all. If I picked this up and then tried to check everything, we would not be able to duplicate the concern. Be mindful of that. Always check your suspension components at ride height as well as up in the air. Bushings and stuff, you can get a bar in there and move them around. But that mount up there being ripped out, you couldn't see it because there was cover over top of it. So be mindful of that. If you change the conditions, it might change the concern. Now we got it up in the air and the boot's pulled up. There is a little bit of oil on it, but not much. Not a significant amount at all. Just a little bit where it's collecting dust. This side over here doesn't even look wet. But of course our boot's shredded completely. First of all, the last guy to have this wheel off might have some explaining to do because all these lug nuts were loose. When you get it up here to this point, I always take and grab this sway bar link and shake it, see if it's got any slack to it. These, they don't have to be at ride height to check. It helps, but you take a shake, you can usually get some slack out of them if they have any wear to them at all. Next, we're going to wire brush off the top threads, and I'll take a chaser and run on them if there's any threads out here on the end. That'll help us get these apart without ruining them. Performing that simple step there will save you a lot of headache, because most of the time there is no hex behind here or no ledge to really get a vice grip on, so there's no way to hold this. They depend on this Allen here to hold this. If you've got bad threads or anything, this is usually a lock nut, so you need your threads cleaned up in order to get this apart correctly. I'm going to put a little bit of Pantopis on this and we'll see if we can get it off of here without much trouble. Now we'll grab the attaching hardware off of this side. I try to work the bolt back and forth. Gravity check. All right, now I'm going to grab my level and I'm going to check to see the alignment of this, and we're going to put it back to match whenever we're putting this thing back together. As per usual, this isn't exact, but it gets it close. We're sitting somewhere between spring thaw and second winter, and it's nasty. Be careful about this. If you lean it out, you're gonna pop the inner joint out of its socket, and then that's not good. I usually twist it forward. You always want to check gravity at least 4 or 5 times during the job to make sure it still works. Now we're using a Monroe quick strut number 272484 for the driver's side. It's a 483 for the passenger side. The difference between them is the bracket. It's a mirror image for the other side, so there is a right and left for this. There's the 272483, and it's a mirror image of the other side. Now, like I said, all it takes is one extra bad part being bad. Yeah, come off of there. This piece in here is rubber, and it is ripped out on our vehicle. Can I take it apart and put just a mount in it? Yes, but the strut was leaking a small amount, as you saw. So you're putting a strut back in with 300,000 miles on it. Why'd you do that? Put new struts on it. And like I say, in some applications, the springs tend to break. So we replace the entire thing. We've been doing that for quite some time. And all over, the jobs have been getting cheaper, comparatively. Putting this back in can be a little bit fun sometimes. If you're by yourself. Propping it on something down there will help. Come on. I'm gonna have to get taller. There we go. Most of the time, there's no adjustment here, but sometimes there is. So you just got to pay attention. I got a little bit of movement out of that, a degree or so. That's why you always want to double check it. All right, let's go over and do the other side. A lot of times they get danced around and this bracket gets bent. The other side was bent pretty good. Now this clip here lines up in some holes on the strut itself. Locks in just like this. Now we got all that done. We're gonna tighten these up. I'm gonna see if I can hit it with the impact and zip it down. If not, I'll have to put the deal in there and tighten it back up. Usually once you got it apart and the threads are all cleaned up, it goes ahead and works. You just don't want to let that spin freely if you're going to reuse that, because that will ruin the bearing in there. You notice I didn't just hold the trigger. We're going to go ahead and take care of the other side and put her back on the ground. I do not like these shouldered setups. Because they are difficult to get started. Now, there is a power setting on your impact gun for a reason. You turn it all the way down when you're doing stuff like that. You're going to torque them anyway. Turn it all the way down, just get them run down. Then you get your torque wrench. I use a pry bar with a piece of heater hose on it so it doesn't mar the wheel. See? They've all got to rotate, or at least try to move. I usually run them until it quits moving. Quit moving. Now the other day, I was watching Cole the Cornstar, and he had put some contactors in for running his lights. Well, we've been having all kinds of problems with this switch here because they don't make a high enough amperage switch that's small to run that 220 motor. So I told him, well, they got a contactor, just basically a gigantic relay. So my boss went over there and got that box there and got that little switch there, and we're running a contactor, which is basically a gigantic relay, so that we can run a light switch on this. The switch used to get stuck down, and we had a hammer hanging up right there to pound that. He also hooked up the safety catch. Now we're going to put this cover back on here. I got my hardware I put inside so that I wouldn't lose it. We've also got to put some new plastic clips in. This one here was broken, the other was missing, so I'll replace that, you know, so that it has actually something holding it in besides just the windshield wipers. Well, that takes care of this one. One of the things that I do is I note the position of the windshield wipers with the dirt line that's always underneath them this time of year, especially on somebody that lives off a paved road like I do. They tell you where they always run, so put them back where they were unless they have a lock or something. These didn't. That's why you saw me lift it up a little bit and line it up before I tighten them down. But next I got the struts on, got the noise taken care of. So like, comment, subscribe, hit your little bell notification, share it all around. We'll talk to you later.